What if I told you that Ferrari could have discovered something in the Mercedes car that would completely change the outcome of the championship? And that everything exploded right after the Japanese Grand Prix? Because what seemed like a simple technical improvement by the German team is now being pointed out as a possible, illegal trick. And Ferrari has not remained silent. The big question is, are we facing a brilliant innovation, or a maneuver at the limit of the regulations that could end in scandal? Ferrari did not explode out of nowhere after the Japanese Grand Prix. This has been brewing for a long time, since the beginning of the 2025 season, where the sensations were contradictory, because while the team showed flashes of real competitiveness, strategic limitations and decisions that prevented them from capitalizing on their true potential were also exposed, something that had already been clearly seen in previous races where the performance did not reflect what the car could really give under normal conditions. And this is where the context that changes everything begins to take shape, because Ferrari was not only fighting against its own mistakes, but against an increasingly tight scenario where McLaren had taken a leap forward. Red Bull continued to be a constant threat, and Mercedes was beginning to show signs of recovery with a car that, little by little, began to stand out in very specific areas, especially in race pace and consistency in long runs, something that did not go unnoticed within the paddock. But what was really important was not only that Mercedes improved, but how it was doing it, because in such a close championship, where differences are measured in thousands, any suspicious gain is analyzed in detail, and it was precisely after Japan when Ferrari began to connect the dots, observing anomalous behavior in the performance of the German car in certain phases of the race, especially in moments where degradation, downforce and efficiency should have played against it, but did not. This set off alarms within Maranello because it did not fit with the logic they had been using since the beginning of the year, and much less with what they themselves were experimenting with their own car, which, although it had rhythm, was much more sensitive to changing conditions and strategic decisions, as was already evident in scenarios where small choices ended up having a huge impact on the final result. From there, the narrative changes completely because Ferrari stops seeing Mercedes as a rival that has simply improved, and begins to suspect that there is something more behind it, something that is not evident at first glance but that could be making a key difference in performance, and it is precisely at that point where the word that changes everything is born: trick. Not just any trick, but one that would be taking advantage of a gray area in the technical regulations. Something that in Formula One we have seen repeated over and over again throughout history, where the smartest teams do not necessarily break the rules, but they do push them to the limit to a point where they force the FIA to intervene. Therefore, what happens after the Japanese GP is not an impulsive reaction. It is a calculated decision, a move that seeks to stop a possible advantage before it is too late, because in such a tight championship, allowing a rival to maintain a dubious innovation for several races can mean losing any real chance at the title. This is where the conflict really begins, where the track takes a back seat and the battle moves to the offices, because Ferrari not only wants answers, it wants a complete review, and above all, it wants to make it clear that it is not going to sit idly by while Mercedes plays on that dangerous boundary between the legal and the questionable. And the most important thing of all is that this is just the beginning. And now we enter the most delicate point of this entire story, because what Ferrari has put on the table is not a simple unfounded suspicion, but a very specific interpretation of what Mercedes would be doing with its car, a concept that, although it has not been officially confirmed in all its details, revolves around how the car manages its aerodynamic and mechanical behavior in different phases of the race, something that in modern Formula One can make enormous differences without the need to explicitly violate the regulations. According to what has been reconstructed from what was observed on the track after the Japanese GP, Ferrari believes that Mercedes has found a way to dynamically alter certain characteristics of the car, especially in key situations such as acceleration, cornering, or even tire wear management, which would allow them to maintain a more constant performance compared to their rivals, something that is extremely suspicious in a context where degradation and sensitivity of the car are critical factors for all teams. This is what makes the word trick have so much weight here, because it is not an obviously illegal piece, nor something that stands out visually as has happened in other historical controversies, but rather a system or concept that would be hidden within the normal operation of the car, taking advantage of a gray area of the technical regulations, where interpretation plays as important a role as the written rule itself. And this is where Ferrari has decided to attack, because its argument is not based solely on Mercedes doing something different, but on the fact that this something could be violating the spirit of the regulations, especially if it involves a variation in the behavior of the car that should be regulated or directly prohibited under the current rules, something that in previous seasons has already generated direct interventions from the FIA when a team has gone too far along those lines. Furthermore, what reinforces Ferrari's position is that this supposed system would fit perfectly with the performance pattern that Mercedes has shown recently, a car that has not only improved, but seems to respond more efficiently in conditions where other teams, including Ferrari, struggle to maintain stability and consistency, especially in long runs and high-demand situations. This completely changes the reading of what we are seeing on the track, because it stops being a simple technical evolution and becomes a possible structural advantage, something that not only affects a specific race, but could condition the development of the entire season if it is not reviewed in time, and that is precisely why Ferrari has decided not to wait any longer. The key to everything is that if this system is confirmed and considered outside acceptable limits, Mercedes could be forced to modify its car, which would have an immediate impact on its performance, altering the balance of forces on the grid at a time when each team is fighting to consolidate its position in the championship. But there is also the other scenario, and that is that the FIA determines that what Mercedes is doing is completely legal, which would not only validate its approach, but would force the rest of the teams to react quickly so as not to be left behind, generating a new technological race within the season itself. That is why this act is so important, because here it not only defines whether or not there is an illegality, but it establishes the framework of what will be allowed in the development of single-seaters from now on, and Ferrari knows it. It knows that this is a key opportunity to stop a direct rival or, in the worst case, to understand exactly where they should direct their own development. If Ferrari's protest prospers, the impact would be immediate because Mercedes would be forced to modify that supposed system that is giving it an advantage, which could make them go back several tenths per lap. And in a championship as tight as the current one, that means going from being a direct contender to being trapped in the medium-high fight, losing key positions to rivals that do not forgive mistakes. But beyond the direct blow to Mercedes, this would open a huge opportunity for Ferrari, which would not only regain ground in the fight, but would also validate its reading of the regulations, reinforcing its position within the paddock as a team that not only competes on the track, but also in the political and technical field, something fundamental in a season where every detail counts. Now, if the opposite happens, if the FIA determines that everything Mercedes is doing is completely legal, then the blow would be for Ferrari, because it would mean that they have been losing performance against a concept that they did not know how to detect or replicate in time, forcing them to react against the clock in the middle of the season, something extremely complicated when resources, time and updates are already planned months in advance. And this is where the real danger comes in for Ferrari, because it would not just be a specific defeat, it would be a warning that Mercedes has found a more efficient technical direction, which could set a trend for the rest of the year, forcing all teams to follow that same path if they want to stay competitive. In parallel, the rest of the grid is also watching because teams like McLaren, which currently lead with consistency, or Red Bull, which continues to lurk with its ability to react, know that any decision on this case can alter the entire board, changing strategies, developments and even priorities within each team. And this is what makes this story much bigger than a simple protest, because we are facing a battle that can define not only who wins a race, but who has the structural advantage to fight for the championship until the end of the year. Ferrari has already made a move. Mercedes remains silent. And the FIA now has in its hands a decision that can change everything. Because in Formula One, races are not only won on the track, they are also won within the limits of the regulations. Ferrari has decided not to be left behind. It has decided to act, question and pressure at a time where every detail counts, because it understands perfectly that in such a tight season it is not enough to be fast on the track. You also have to be intelligent off it, anticipate, detect and react before others. Mercedes, for its part, represents exactly what Formula One has always been in its purest essence. Innovation to the limit, aggressive interpretation of the regulations and the ability to find performance where others do not see it. And it is precisely this that today places them at the center of controversy. The FIA now has the final say, and its decision will not only determine whether this trick is allowed or not, but will also mark the technical path that all teams will follow for the remainder of the championship, because as soon as that limit is established, everyone will know how far they can go. And meanwhile, the real battle is already underway. It's not just Ferrari against Mercedes. That it is a fight for control of the championship, for the direction of development and for who best understands a regulation that, as always in Formula One, is never as simple as it seems. Because in the end, it's not just the fastest who wins here. The one who best interprets the rules of the game wins. Let me know in the comments what you think about all this.